They say, home is the safest place in the world. But the night we returned to our old family estate in America, something was already waiting for us. A glowing pumpkin sat in front of the door, and carved into it in blood-red letters were the words, "Welcome home." And before sunrise, someone in my family was supposed to die. So turn off the lights, lock your doors, and if you love terrifying horror stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Because after tonight's story, you might think twice before opening your front door at night. My name is Ethan Carter, and I lived in Chicago with my wife Olivia and our 7-year-old daughter Sophie. Our life was completely normal. Work in the morning, school during the day, movies on weekends, and family dinners at night. Everything was fine, until we returned to my father's old estate in Vermont. The house was hidden deep inside the forests of America, far away from the nearest town. After my father died, the estate had remained abandoned for 15 years. And honestly, some places are better left abandoned. A week before Halloween, I got a call from a lawyer. He told me that if nobody claimed the property soon, the government would take ownership of the land. I had no choice but to go back. Olivia hated the idea immediately. She called it "that creepy house in the woods," and said she didn't want to stay there. But Sophie was excited. She laughed and called it a haunted mansion. I smiled too, but deep inside I was terrified, because I still remembered my father's final warning. He always used to tell me, never go near the woods behind that house after dark. When I was younger, I thought he was trying to scare me. But now I understood, he had been scared himself. We reached Vermont around midnight during a heavy storm. Rain slammed against the windshield while our SUV slowly climbed the narrow road through the forest. The deeper we drove into the woods, the quieter everything became. There were no people, no lights, only cold wind moving through the trees. Then suddenly, we saw the house. It was huge, broken, and standing alone in complete darkness. Every time lightning flashed across the sky, its shattered windows became visible for a split second. The place looked less like a home and more like a grave. Olivia whispered nervously, "Ethan, I really don't like this place." Honestly, neither did I. Then Sophie suddenly pointed toward the front door. "Daddy, what's that?" she asked. I looked forward, and my heart stopped. A giant glowing pumpkin sat in front of the entrance. A horrifying face had been carved into it, but the scariest part was the message written across it in blood-red letters, "Welcome home." Olivia looked nervous and asked if someone knew we were coming. I slowly shook my head. Nobody knew. Sophie laughed nervously and suggested it was probably just Halloween decoration. But I knew it wasn't decoration. It was a message. A warning. For us. I slowly walked toward the pumpkin. The closer I got, the stranger it felt. Its eyes looked almost human, like it was staring directly at me. Angry and uncomfortable, I picked it up and threw it off the porch. The pumpkin smashed against the ground with a loud crash. And then, a sound came from inside it. Tap. 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 Like something was scratching from the inside. I froze instantly. Then suddenly a loud noise exploded from inside the house. Bang! Olivia screamed, "There's somebody inside." I grabbed a flashlight and rushed into the house. The smell inside was horrible, dust, mold, and something rotten. Everything looked untouched for years, but then I noticed something terrifying. Fresh muddy footprints covered the floor. Someone had just walked through the house. "Who's there?" I shouted into the darkness. No answer came back. Then a sound echoed from upstairs. Tap. 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 Slow knocking sounds. I slowly climbed the stairs. Every step creaked loudly beneath my feet. At the end of the long dark hallway, my father's room stood open. I pointed the flashlight inside, and my blood turned cold. Someone was standing there. A tall black figure. Completely still. Watching me. "Who are you?" I shouted. Suddenly the figure vanished. I ran into the room, but nobody was there. Only an old rocking chair slowly moving back and forth by itself. And written across the wall in dark red letters were the words, "You should have never come back." That night, all three of us slept in the same room. Or at least, we tried to. Around 2 a.m., Sophie suddenly sat upright in bed. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't awake. In a soft voice, she whispered, "He's outside." Olivia panicked immediately. "Sophie? Who's outside?" Sophie slowly pointed toward the window. I pulled the curtain aside, and my breathing stopped. Outside the house stood dozens of glowing pumpkins. Every pumpkin faced our window. And standing among them was a man. Tall. Thin. Wearing torn black clothes. But instead of a head, he had a giant burning pumpkin. Olivia screamed. I immediately shut the curtain. Then the knocking started at the front door. Slow, heavy. Thud. 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 Then a voice spoke from outside. Rotten, deep, not human. Welcome. Home. None of us slept that night. The next morning, I drove into the nearby town. The moment I mentioned the pumpkin man, the entire diner went silent. An old woman nearly dropped her coffee cup. One man whispered, "You stayed at the Carter estate?" I nodded slowly. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then the old woman leaned closer and quietly said, "You need to leave that place immediately." Then she told me a terrifying story. 40 years earlier, a man named Elias Grady had lived near those woods. He grew pumpkins, hundreds of them. But people believed he performed strange rituals deep in the forest at night. Then children started disappearing, one after another. The townspeople eventually attacked Elias's farm. But what they found inside terrified everyone. Human teeth. Bones. And children's names carved into pumpkins. That same night, the townspeople burned Elias alive. But before he died, he screamed, "I will return every Halloween, and when the Carter family comes home, I will welcome them myself." My heart sank immediately. Because our estate had been built directly on Elias Grady's old land. I rushed back to the house. But the moment I arrived, I froze again. Another pumpkin sat in front of the door. This time, the message carved into it said, "Let me in." And inside the pumpkin, there wasn't a candle. There was a human eye. Watching me. Olivia started crying and begged me to leave immediately. We packed our bags as fast as we could. I jumped into the SUV and tried starting the engine. But nothing happened. Again and again, I turned the key, but the SUV wouldn't start. Then Sophie's voice came softly from the back seat. "Daddy." I turned around slowly. She was staring toward the woods. "He's back." At the edge of the forest stood the pumpkin man again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Small children stood beside him, and every child wore a glowing pumpkin over their head. Suddenly a loud crash echoed from inside the house. Bang! We ran back inside. Upstairs, new words had appeared on the wall in dark red letters. "One of you must stay." Olivia completely broke down. This has to be a real person. But deep inside, I already knew the truth. This thing wasn't human.